morning, guys. So I did my lesson over dashes and hyphens. So first we're going to look at dashes. So just an overview of what they do. They interrupt the flow of a sentence. They're basically saying like, hey, look at me. Like I'm saying important information. So what they look like maybe in a sentence, they're formed by typing 2 hyphens. So on your computer, there's a hyphen key, not a dash key. So you type 2 hyphens, and then usually it forms. So they can either operate independently or in tandem with another dash. So independently is this sentence right here, meet my sister, the homecoming queen, or in tandem, Lim's favorite board games, Risk and Axis and Allies, deal with military strategy. So you can use them either way. So there's actually 4 different functions of a dash. So we're going to look at 1 and 2 right now. So you use a dash when you want to emphasize a phrase, clause, or a list in the middle of a sentence. Like this one, like I said earlier, like look at this, pay attention, it's important. So you're setting apart what's important in the sentence, and then stress importance at the end of the sentence as well. Here's a little practice sentence. I suspected she might be unhappy, but that letter was still a shock. And then functions 3 and 4, you can interchange dashes and parentheses. So if you think you are going to use parentheses, you could use dashes instead if you wanted to. So here's the same sentence, one with parentheses and one with dashes. They do the same exact thing, so they're interchangeable.
Is that a true story? You have a cousin who is
No.
got an offer from LSU?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't even know if I have a cousin that plays basketball. So, and then dashes in dialogue. So if you're reading like a play, maybe dashes are used to say when people get interrupted. So if I was Sal and you guys were Amy, you guys have to interrupt me. So
We were supposed to meet at 5.
Yeah, exactly, just like that. Okay, so I'm gonna have you do a little bit of a dash activity. So I really like scenario 1 on page 207, so I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. All right, I'm gonna have 3 people share for this scenario, and then we're gonna do another one later. So you're not off the hook if you'll share the next one if you don't share this one. So 3 people. Okay.
While I was sitting at home this summer, I won a trip to hike Mount Everest. It was thrilling to look at the scenery, dash, dark slopes, monstrous trees made tiny, dash, while the guide took us closer to the summit.
Awesome. That was really good. Was that true?
No.
I love it though.
You were gonna do like a.
Oh, yeah.
One of the noises like
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good though. So what did you offset with your dashes? Because you used 2 of them, right?
Yes. Dark slopes and monstrous trees made tiny, so the scenery that.
So something important to give you like a visual of what your sentence is about. Awesome. Anyone else?
I thought I knew exactly what my summer would look like, dash, but I was wrong. My uncle, dash, the one with 4 arms, dash, offered to take me on a snorkeling trip in Alaska.
You make the best stories, I swear. Okay, sounds good.
My summer started with a bang! Exclamation point, literally exclamation point. My family and I were flying to Disney World for a trip, and while we were flying, the plane's engine exploded.
Oh.
We had to crash land in Tennessee. There, we met Dolly Parton and Blake Shelton. They were beautiful people, dash, tall, white teeth, and curious eyes.
Nice. That sounds very traumatizing.
Yeah, especially that Blake Shelton bit.
Heroin.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay, so now we're gonna move on to hyphens. Basically a dash's cousin, but they do different things. So an overview, they connect words together or word parts together. So they connect 2 or more words. So a dash connected like a phrase or a sentence to another sentence or phrase. Hyphens connect words to other words or word parts. So what they look like, a hyphen is half the size of a dash. There's actually a hyphen button on your computer. So, and then you do not want to use spaces around the hyphen. So they'll like touch each word part. You don't want to use space. So there's actually 5 purposes where we use hyphens. So we'll look at them. So number 1 is modifying nouns. So like in my example sentence here, her mom only bought off-brand shoes. Off-brand cannot be mixed up. So you can't say brand off shoes. That's why we use a hyphen, off brand, because they need to connect. You can't switch them around. But an example where you can switch them around, her mom only bought old faded jeans. You could say faded old jeans. That's why we don't use a hyphen in between that one. So number 2 is connecting numbers. This one's pretty obvious. She ran 26 miles. So 26 are connected by a hyphen. Function number 3 is adding affixes. So affixes come before the word. So like ex-boyfriend, self-image, mid-April, all-knowing, stuff like that. Number 4 is describing age. So meet Isaac, my 3-year-old cousin. They just all connect by hyphen. And then number 5 is joining new words to create a new concept. So these are kind of like made up words, I guess. I wanted to meet his kind of girlfriend. So, yeah. And then we can do an activity. So they're found on page 213, and you can do whatever when you want. All right. Are we ready to move on? Okay, I'll let my other three people get share. You want to go first? Okay, awesome.
My brother, quite a team, rules my mind constantly. He is without playing charm, never give up attitude, and detail-oriented attention.
Awesome. Yeah, that was great.
I don't know.
Okay.
So I basically did scenario one, and I only got halfway through the second one.
Okay.
Examples of, so the one that they do have is how it is at the Hyphens. There could be 3 children who are all at the age of 1. And with Hyphens, you or the reader would know that the children are age 3.
Awesome. I agree with you. Totally. It can be
writing.
what?
You're writing.
It can be confusing if you don't use those hyphens.
So I did scenario 2, like Elisa. I'd like to introduce you to my roommates. Over here, we have Hoppy, my paunchy, bunny-loving friend. Bunny-loving is hyphenated. This is Lopez, the Mexican Jesus with scary good classic rock knowledge. So Mexican Jesus, he really did look like a Mexican version of Jesus. And short and squat though, and scary good. And then finally Rob Man, which has always been hyphenated. Video game playing, skateboarding Canadian who's quasi-blind without his glasses. So quasi-blind and video game playing.
Nice. Awesome. Good examples. Okay. And lastly, I just wanted to leave you with this. Dashes versus hyphens, just as a reminder. How are they different? Obviously, a dash is longer compared to a hyphen, which is a little bit shorter. And then dashes connect parts of sentences, and then hyphens connect words, other words. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to know the difference between them. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, couple of things that I wanted to point out. First, I don't know if you've ever seen this before. M dash versus N dash. Have you ever, has that shown up before? Okay, N dashes are hyphens. Sometimes this is just what they're called. And M dashes are dashes, okay? And it's just a different way of explaining them. N dash is a hyphen because it's shorter. And M dash is an actual dash because it's longer. It's like double the size. So if you end up seeing these phrases, that's really all they mean, okay? But every once in a while, you'll see something that just has a different moniker, right? So, and then I wanted to go back up to this one. Yes, functions 1 and 2. This sentence. Could we just make that 3 sentences? Look at this with an understood you. We've never really talked about understood yous, but I'm assuming that most of us know. It's not, the subject isn't stated, but because it's a command, you're talking to one particular person or one group of people, so it's just understood that it's you. Pay attention, again, an understood you. It's important. Well, it is important. That's a complete thought. So if that could be 3 sentences, and we're separating that, is that a run-on? Is that grammatically correct? Is it stylistically deviant? Are we okay with it? Under which circumstances are we okay with it? How formal does the writing have to be that this would be inappropriate? Would it ever be inappropriate? Or is it always just kind of okay? Because essentially we have 3 independent clauses, 3 sentences, joined together by 2 dashes, which shouldn't necessarily be the same thing as a semicolon or a piece of end punctuation. Dashes don't take the place of comma and coordinating conjunctions. What are your thoughts? Is this okay?
I think it depends who's writing. I feel like that's kind of a cop-out answer, but I feel like if it fits your style of writing, then it's fine.
Okay. Other thoughts? Depends on who's writing? Depends on audience? Just tell you right now, I can't think of a whole lot of reasons that this would be inappropriate. I'm fine with this. Unless you are writing some super formalized, either political, theological treatise or something like that, it is relatively informal. I would argue more for the understood use than for the dashes. Because you've heard that you're not supposed to write with second person. Has any English teacher ever told you, don't write with second person pronouns? Don't write with first person pronouns. Again, there's a reason that they say that, but I think a lot of times they overextend. I'm more concerned about the informality of understood use than I am the hyphens. But I did want to point it out because essentially this is 3 sentences, right? So just to be aware. This one, I suspect you might be unhappy. Dash, but that letter was still a shock. Could it just be a comma? So is that wrong? No, it's not wrong. Under normal circumstances, it's a comma. And yeah, dashes aren't necessarily just supposed to be a perfect switch with commas. Like, they're not the same thing. But I think you did a really good job of explaining that it's there to draw emphasis, right? Yeah, it could be a comma, but there's a reason that author didn't want it to be a comma. Because now, instead of her unhappiness, the emphasis in this sentence is on that letter. That there was something in that letter that, despite her unhappiness, that letter was significant. And now I want to know more about that letter. If that was just a comma, I wouldn't care too much. Not quite as much, because you are right. Unless you overuse hyphens or, dashes, that should draw your attention. And I'll show you another example of that as soon as we're done with commas. Anyway, other questions about hyphens, about dashes? Good? All right. Miss Maddie, you and your love affair of commas.
Oh, yes. What a wonderful time we had.
Such joy. Such wonder.
Hello, everyone. We are going to be learning about commas, and I thought this was very funny. And it's like, yeah, that changes the meaning completely without the comma, because that's unfortunate without the comma. No one likes to be told that. So commas are very important. Yes.
Yes.
So why are commas hard? The book talked about a few reasons why they are difficult to use correctly for various reasons. One is commonality and misuse equals trouble. They're used a lot, and almost every grammatical form that we've learned about this semester has had a comma use in it. However, it is misused a lot, so that causes problems as we read the misused forms and then get the correct forms mixed up with the misused forms because they're all used in the same piece of writing. And then also there are at least 15 different distinct functions of the comma, and most are stylistic. Thus, it means that they can be necessary and appropriate at certain times, or optional and superfluous at others. So there is a familiarity to commas, making them a lot less intimidating. But then students will put one in when in doubt of whether or not they need one, instead of just avoiding them altogether.
That is, by the way, so true. Lots of extra superfluous commas in the writing that I see, and the writing that you will see too, undoubtedly.
I do that a lot.
Yes,
Commas.
yes, you do, but that's okay.
Yes.
You're not alone.
So here's some funny ways commas again are used or should be used. Stop clubbing baby seals, which could be taken that way. And also slow children crossing versus slow, comma, children crossing. Because otherwise that's, again, unfortunate. The book also talks about some metaphors to help us understand the two different categories of commas. So the first metaphor is commas are hinges, pivots, rails, and cranks in the grammar. They allow sentences to do things. They allow sentences to shift in order to emphasize, elaborate, and provide detail. And then there is no such thing as a generic use of a comma. It's like ball handling skills. You can't just teach one way to use a comma and then expect it to be versatile throughout the rest of the writing. Skills in one, just like skills in one sport, do not always translate to another sport. A specific situation makes practice meaningful, and that's how real learning happens. Each specific situation provides a new use for a comma. And no one teaches you, or I mean, your use of packing snowballs doesn't necessarily translate to other things in life, but that's a specific, I mean, you could maybe pack meatballs or something with that skill, but like, it's very limited the amount of things you can do. So yeah, commas can do an array of things that don't translate to other purposes, like introducing a phrase or adding more detail. So commas connect clauses and phrases to words. And one error that a lot of times people can make is the comma splice. There are less than 2 weeks left in the semester, comma, we are swamped with work. That is the comma splice because it is two independent clauses that are combined with a comma. And this is an example of when a comma is trying to do too much. It doesn't flow very well, and I guess it sounds fine, but the comma is working way too hard to hold those two together. So you add a coordinating conjunction to help the comma out, and it's not strong enough to hold it. So you add a coordinating conjunction to help. One usage, I'm going to talk about 4 of them, as there are many examples in those 4. But the first one is joining independent clauses with coordinating conjunctions. This aspect allows for a comparison to be made between 2 parts of the sentence and is paired with a coordinating conjunction. As you can see in the example, Keely and Jenna's drink orders are being compared to each other. So Jenna bought a double latte, comma, and Keely chose an iced macchiato. I don't know if that's true about either of you.
Sometimes.
Okay. Yes.
That one's a double shot of espresso, then yes.
She's okay with that.
I agree with that.
And then they also connect introductory elements to independent clauses. So like when using participles and absolute phrases, the commas are used to separate the modifying or clarifying statements from the rest of the sentence. This signifies what the modifiers are modifying and connects the ideas in the sentence. These commas in example also signify that the words within them can be moved to different parts of the sentence and it would still make sense, effectively bracketing those words. So in the example, Isaiah, comma, listening and nodding, comma, sat in class before chapel. So listening and nodding got bracketed by the commas, and that way you can move those words to end, like before
Isaiah, which would be listening and nodding. Isaiah sat in class before chapel, which still makes sense. And then you can also move it to the end of the sentence where Isaiah sat in class before chapel, comma, listening and nodding. And it still would make sense, but the commas bracket it and make sure that we know as readers that it can be moved and it combines the thought. They also join a phrase or dependent clause to an independent clause. A comma is used here as the glue in the sentence, joining the parts that cannot stand alone to the independent parts of the sentence. They are essential here because the dependent and independent parts can be different ideas, and they keep the flow of the sentence. So after Elissa finished her homework, comma, she started on her final project for Dr. Nonhoff, which probably isn't true. But the bolded part is the independent sentence, and the comma helps keep after Elissa finished her homework as a part of that sentence and keeps them connected to keep the thought together.
By the way, does anybody remember what happens if we switch those two clauses? What happens to the comma? If we start it with, she started her final project for Dr. Nonhoff after Elisa finished her homework. Disappears, no comma. Because that after, that subordinated conjunction kind of takes the place. Good. Yay, we're learning.
The last use of a comma is they set off restrictive and adjectival clauses, separating adjectives and separate adjectives in a list. So the kind, comma, diligent, comma, thoughtful students showed Bree where to find the Zoom link. So the commas set off and separate the different adjectives in this list, keeping the confusion down. And this is also where the Oxford comma comes in. And Oxford commas basically are after the second word in a list, or the second to last word in a list, I should say. And that keeps everything separated. But people who don't like the Oxford comma, like in media writing or in the APA style, but it can also be confusing depending on what the sentence is, because when you have different ideas in the list, you can be accidentally combining those last two together, which makes the sentence change meaning depending on what you're talking about. So there's a whole controversy over whether or not the Oxford comma is a good thing or not. Though in most cases, it's probably a good thing. So let's have some fun with commas. Write your own misuse of a comma and the correct version of it, and then we will share it as a class. And these are some examples to help get the creativity flowing.
Correct on a raft in the ocean. Wow, harsh.
I don't want one looking up comma mutes. All right, anyone like to share their misuse of a comma? Yes, Alyssa.
So the misuse one is let's run over comma. No. Okay, the misuse one is let's run over as the. So the correct one is let's run over comma.
Nice, well done. Yes. Anyone? Yes, Jenna?
I said let's drink comma Adrian, and then my misuse was let's drink Adrian.
Nice, good.
The right one. The lottery ticket scratched. Carl, the horse-faced boy, won $200. The bad one is the lottery ticket scratched Carl. The horse-faced boy won $200. I added a hyphen to that one too. Notice the horse.
Anyone else like to share theirs? Okay, we got one more activity. As we are having more fun with commas, and as commas are used in almost every single form that we've learned, go ahead and pick one of the previous scenarios, but focus on the use of commas instead of the other. So if you want to pick one that you had problems with or thought was interesting, there are those pages.
Oh, that's a clever use of.
All right. let's have two people share. Would anyone like to go first? Or be one of those special people that get to share?
Special people that get to share. Wow, that isn't teacher lingo. Such
go.
teacher.
Thanks, Hugh.
I'm almost done.
Okay.
Okay. So I chose to do the complex sentences on page 79, and I just did the first scenario. So I'll give you a little background. It was how you're trying to get out of like your family's plans to go hang out with your friends. So I said, do you want me to tell you every time I use a comma?
Sure.
I use my finger. Hi, family. I, unfortunately, made plans for tonight. Although I will be free tomorrow. Tonight I will prioritize Grandma and her sardine casserole because yum. Tomorrow, bright and early, I will scrub the greasy garbage cans, help with the completion of the 2,000-piece art puzzle, and maybe take a nap.
Nice. Well done. Use some commas.
It is a lot of them.
Yes.
Fantastic and disgusting.
Who wants to be the second person to share?
Nobody makes eye contact.
Bree, do you have something that you would like to share?
I mean, I do. But it was scenario 2 for the calm down sentences and conjunctions.
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan of Star Wars, so I struggled with this one, but yeah.
Okay.
I didn't get all of it like written down, but I'm like, it's cool that you like Star Trek, comma, but Star Wars has a lot of interesting sci-fi aspects like future type technology, fighting, robot, another robot. I meant to say 2 robots.
Cool.
And a giant metal ball that looks like a weird moon that can go boom.
Nice.
Yeah. I
Very
didn't get
cool.
all of that written down, but
Wonderful use of commas.
yeah.
I hope you all had fun with commas and are more comfortable with using them now, just like I'm more comfortable and understand them better.
Do you, did that help?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Well, yeah, a little bit.
Knowing them and putting them into practice is going to take a little bit, but I do feel
Yeah.
better about knowing how to use them.
Right, that's good. Okay, so take a look at page 123. There are a lot of scenarios in this book that I like. Scenario 2 on page 123 is one of my favorites because I think there's a lot of depth to this one. As an English teacher, I tried to find a lot of writing prompts and it was hard to find good writing prompts. I like this one. Not only do I like this, I like what it's asking students to do. I kind of like how it's written. Okay, so think about the punctuation that we've covered today and over the course of the last couple of days. You've worked hard as a writer, comma, mostly on articles for your school newspaper, comma, and you've even gotten some of your stuff printed in area magazines. Now, comma, your big break is here. It turns out that a rather famous person, one of your favorite celebrities, you know, I'm set by the double dashes, has recently bought a home in the area and wants to support your people in their career dreams. You've been selected to meet with this VIP, conduct an interview, and write about your experience. This is a seriously big deal and could lead to great things for you. But there are also some challenges. You don't want to just audio record an interview and print a transcript. There's the little hyphen in there. This is just really good writing. That's not journalism or real writing. Instead, you want to recreate your live experience with this celeb for your readers. Make them feel like they were there. Make them see what you saw and notice what you noticed. You have to capture this person's appearance, mannerisms, expressions, physical gestures, as well as the room you were in the home itself. It won't be easy, but you know you can do it. Now you're ready to give it a shot. Create a series of observations from your interview experience that really zoom in on some of the details that you think will really engage readers. Use absolute phrases to help make the scene come alive. And I would argue you could very easily add punctuation to make it come alive. Okay. So I wanted to show you an example of one of my favorite poems. I hate Victorian literature. Passionately and deeply, I hate Victorian literature. But one of the Victorians that I actually adore is Elizabeth Barrett Browning. This is Sonnet 10 from Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Read it silently. Then I have a couple of questions for you. What's the most important line in the poem? Just glance at the poem. Don't read it. Glance at it. What's the most important line in the poem?
I love thee, dot, 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 Mark, I love thee.
Yeah, why? Why is that the most important line in the poem? How is that the most important line in the poem?
It's just got a lot of punctuation from the rest of the poem. It's just like commas. And this one has ellipses, exclamation points, and hyphens.
Yeah, that is the most important line in the poem. And it's set off by punctuation. Even if you don't read it, just looking at it, visually, it's the most important, right? I don't think there are any other exclamation points. There are no other ellipses. There is one other double dash. Nope, there's a hyphen, that dash there. There is, yeah, there's a colon there. There's a semicolon up here. But there's a lot of unique punctuation just in that one line. And then if you look at that line and you read it, I love thee. Mark, and this isn't the dude's name. She's just saying, like, pay attention now. I love thee. And she repeats it. So repeating that very short, simple sentence twice with all of that punctuation is supposed to be a bang, right? And I would argue it does. That is exactly what it does exactly what she's intending it to do. Right? So when you are looking at literature, when you are looking at, even if it's not formal literature, when you're looking at writing, pay attention to the punctuation. Steal some ideas as far as punctuation goes. Note how other people are using ellipses. Ellipses, by the way, only 3 dots, always 3 dots, unless there's a 4th dot because the ellipses comes at the end of the sentence. Okay? Never 5 dots, never 6 dots, never 17 dots, despite what your mother might post on Twitter. Okay? Never ever. Okay? 3, occasionally 4. That's it. But pay attention to how other people are using punctuation in the same way that you pay attention to how they are using grammatical devices, either correctly or incorrectly. Learn from what you're reading. Okay, read with a critical eye. Okay. One other, I like the poets that use a lot of punctuation. Emily Dickinson was an absolute freak show. I mean,
I think emotionally, she was removed. I think all of her socialization and all of her emotions were pushed out in her poetry because she was an absolute recluse. She had a couple of, you know about Emily Dickinson? You've learned about her? She had a couple of friends that she would occasionally drop off like a pie and a poem. She never published in her life. When she had like a doctor needed to like medically examine her, he would stand outside of her fence and she would stand in the doorway. That's as close as she allowed anybody to get to her. With one exception, there's like one or two people who actually had contact with her. But pretty much any poem by Emily Dickinson, you are going to find a ton of dashes, a ton of them. That is her favorite piece of punctuation. I tend to get into trouble with parentheses. I overuse parentheses every time I write an email. I'm a little nitpicky, right? So if I'm writing even an informal email, like I need to email Isaiah, it's 3 sentences long before I hit send. Sometimes after I hit send, I have this setting on my email that it's not going to send until 10 seconds after I click send. So it just sits there. And then there's an undo button on the bottom left. And undoubtedly, I click that button so I can proofread the email again. And normally I will go back through an email or even a text and I will get rid of about half of the parenthetical statements because I tend to chunk things, you know, and add them to sentences. And sometimes I don't need parentheses. Sometimes the parentheses could be commas. Sometimes they shouldn't even be commas. And I overuse parentheses the same way that other people overuse commas. Do you notice anything in your own writing, punctuation-wise, that you overuse, overutilize, or underutilize? The next time you get an email from me, look at it. I nearly guarantee that there will be at least one parenthetical statement in it. There's something about parentheses that I love. Any punctuation that you have a hard time with? Maddie has admitted that she's kind of a little tentative when it comes to commas. Well, maybe not tentative. Do you put too many in?
I put it in where I think it is, but it's normally not right.
How many of you heard that commas really ought to just go wherever there's a pause? So if you, under normal circumstances, if you take a breath or something, put a comma. That's not necessarily always the case. Okay. Anybody with certain punctuation issues, problems?
I'll try to avoid semicolons.
Semicolons?
I don't know why. I think part of it could be because, like, in elementary and high school, we were told that semicolons usually always go right before however. And I was like, I don't like semicolons. I'm just not going to use them.
Well, and I think there's something to be said about that. I mean, out of all of the pieces of punctuation that we looked at, semicolons to me seem the least necessary. You can write your way around a semicolon pretty darn easily, right? There are really 2 reasons to have a semicolon, one in between 2 independent clauses. That's an easy write around. You make them 2 simple sentences or a comma coordinating conjunction and it's done, right? The other reason is separating a string, a list of things that has commas in them, right? And there are ways that you can write around that too. So semicolons, I think, I mean, I use them more for winky faces than I use them in actual writing. So, other pieces of punctuation that are kind of
I used to get in trouble for using the ... way too much in like middle school and high school.
Yep.
would be full of dot, dot, dots. And it would just be like red pen, no, 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 no. I've stopped using them.
Well, you know what? I wonder if, because I've seen students use that more frequently now than when I started teaching. And I wonder if that's just the advent, and maybe we can learn more about that from Isaiah as far as like presentation and how media changes the way that we utilize the language, new words, new phrases, new structures, new whatever. But I wonder if that pausing, because so much communication happens through Twitter and email and texting, if that is supplanting personal conversation and there's a pause in the conversation, it just makes sense to put a pause grammatically in the writing. And if that transfers then to formal papers, I think that would be an easy transition. So. One more question for you. How many of you have had problems with comma use in the past? Several of you are nodding. Okay. Commas are one of the very last things in the book, and they're the last of the mini lessons. Maddie mentioned that there are 15 uses, 15 various uses for commas, 15 reasons to, and gave us 4 of the most popular, most important things. Do we have problems with commas because we get too much instruction and it complicates? Because 15 different uses is a lot of uses and it's hard to keep that straight. Or do we have problems with commas because we don't get enough instruction and teachers have just made assumptions that we'll be able to, you know, that snowball thing that, you know, if we know how to use them for this, we can figure out how to use them for everything else. Do we spend too much time talking about commas or not enough time talking about commas?
I feel like I needed more time.
You needed more. Consensus?
Maybe more in context, I guess. I feel like it's easy to think about commas in a vacuum, but less about commas like actual writing.
To have teachers say, hey, by the way, I know we're reading Frankenstein, but we're talking about bigger things, but look at the use of commas in this sentence. This is actually really clever what Mary Shelley is doing. Maybe. One more question about that. Would it have, because commas are so ubiquitous, they're in, I mean, Maddie mentioned that they're in pretty much everything that we've done so far has references commas. Should we have started with that? Should that have been like the first piece of this book, was a clarification on how to use commas instead of one of the very last things in the book?
I think they did it for a reason.
So why put punctuation at the end?
I think because we've learned it in context throughout our other, like, learning about appositives and participles. So just reiterating what it is at the end is like, oh, wait, yeah, that's, now I remember noticing that.
Then hopefully it's maybe then a clarification that we've already had some of that structure. Okay. Friday. You've got some presentations on Friday, right? What's going on Friday? Okay. All right. I'm looking forward to this. So, yeah, I guess that's all we got. So have a good day. Well done on the mini lessons, ladies and gentlemen. I kind of like to see how other people present information. Have a good afternoon. See you on Friday.